to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen.
I've been doing this podcast since September of 2012, and boy, are my lips tired.
This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today. Anne-Marie is off traveling here in the United States, actually. She'll be back again next week, but I'm joined today by another fellow American named Kelsey Green, who is in a field of work that's actually kind of familiar to me, in that I used to do something somewhat similar, not the same, but there was some overlap. The difference is about a 17-year difference. So if you look back to where social media was then compared to now, that's probably going to be your biggest indicator. But other than that, I mean, she works with nonprofits. I used to work with nonprofits. She has this new system here that she's building on. That's what I was doing at that time too. It's a lot of overlap. This is going to be kind of fun. So Kelsey, welcome to the program. How are you doing today?
Thank you, Walt. I am doing so well today, and I am delighted to be here. Thank you for having me on your show.
And we're glad to have you. By the way, there's another theme I haven't mentioned yet that I'm sure we're going to spend some time on, because I get a very strong sense from what I learned about you before we brought you onto the program, that you're into the idea of minimizing and having a very minimal access, a minimized access, perhaps is a better way to say it, to social media. And that's, first of all, that's not a popular thing to teach these days, but it's also something that is very indicative, particularly among the younger generations, of where they're actually going. Because somewhat to a degree with the millennials, especially true with the Gen Zs and now with the Gen Alphas, they're moving away from the social medias, or at least the traditional ones, which is kind of mind-boggling to some people, but it also kind of makes sense because, as we've talked about here on the show a lot, one of the things that happens with social media is we kind of tend to become desensitized to each other as human beings. And you're in the process now of emphasizing those direct connections. Let's talk about that for a moment.
Absolutely. Yes. Thanks. And I am a bit heartened by the younger generations deciding to go a different route. Absolutely. But before we dive in, I do want to be clear. I think there are some amazing things that can happen in the digital space. You and I are, of course, connecting here, and that's great. And social media, I think, can have value. So I'm not suggesting to anyone that we completely abandon it or throw your phone away or stomp on your computer, right? So just to come out of the gate saying that, because people can get a little nervous when they hear a term like digital minimalism, or looking at reducing their use, that I mean that we abandon it. So I just want to be clear. But yes, the themes that I am really fired up about right now, and they intersect so beautifully, is in-person community and digital boundaries. And I guess the other thing that I talk a lot about and help people with is their creative projects, bringing forward their work in the world, whatever that is. It could be being a much better parent. It could be a hobby that you have. It doesn't even mean your paid work, right? It could be writing a book, launching a business, whatever these things are. I believe, and the research shows, and my own personal experience show, that these things are more possible and also more pleasurable when we set some boundaries around our digital use.
I like that, especially the setting boundary part, because I mean, I don't know that anybody has gotten into doing studies and so forth on it, particularly from a psychological viewpoint, about the addictive nature of social media. But even if it hasn't been done, it could be done. There's lots of fodder there. There's a lot of data to be mined, so to speak.
There's a lot of data that has been mined, for sure. I think, it's becoming more abundant, but the research is actually quite prolific. I'd say it's fairly definitive. So if you're interested in this, there's a lot of directions you could go, and there's a lot of research around young people, especially, and how addictive this is and how detrimental. So I think one book, if you're a parent, one book, or it's great for adults too, but The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt is an amazing book and very data driven, full of great research.
That's good stuff. I like that. Give us a little bit of background, though, about how you ended up going down this particular path.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it sounds like you and I have that nonprofit connection. Yep. So I received my master's and my undergrad in environmental conservation. I worked as a biologist in the field for a while before moving into different funding programs. And there are so many amazing nonprofits doing incredible work in the world. And often people experience burnout in nonprofits, especially if they're not supported financially by, say, a partner or other wealth.
Yeah.
And that was my experience too. So I was working very, very hard and really hit a point of burnout. And I'm grateful because I was making so little in the nonprofit field, I actually had a side business. So when I hit my total rock bottom, I had this little business already started that I launched as a full-time consulting practice. And I still work with different clients in communications. And it's funny because I actually do advise on digital marketing strategies, and the efficacy of those can be great. And at the same time, I started to see in myself and others this growing unease, this inability to focus, the, if we're going to use the word happiness, looking at the ways that our digital use can really sap our dopamine reserves.
Yeah.
And we can talk more about this, but I will just say that I experienced that for myself. And before you coach on something, it's great to run those experiments.
Yeah, that kind of helps, right? Otherwise, you really know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've been working on these various ways to set digital boundaries while at the same time having a business that is almost completely on digital platforms. And for me personally, it is making a huge difference.
I can understand why, because there are lots of different ways, and you know this as well as anyone. There are lots of different ways to use and interact with social media. They're going to be driven, obviously, by what your most forefront of the mind interests are, because that's what you're going to get feedback on immediately because of the way social media is structured. And because of that, it also is going to be a case of what's your mindset. Are you dealing with something that's really dragging you down? Well, you're going to get a lot of stuff that keeps dragging you down because that's the way social media is structured. On the other hand, if you're somebody who's pursuing something that's passionate and exciting and so forth, you're going to tend to get more of that kind of stuff. So it becomes a mirror. It becomes a way of reflecting back to you what it is that's going on in your life. That's kind of where the addictive side of it comes in. And it's also where the Hall of Mirrors effect happens. It's like everything's, the world kind of mirrors everything back to us anyway. That's just kind of the way things work. But when you get it daily thrust into your face through the social media, that's where the challenges come in. And that's where I'm so interested and intrigued by these ideas of boundaries that you put in place and that you're helping other people to put into place. So let's go into that side a little bit.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I can tell you some of the things that I've done that have really helped and some of the suggestions for people. So the first thing is, to your excellent point, the algorithm, it's so good these days, and it can be really useful. Like you said, if you are seeking out some information, if you're trying to learn a new thing, if you've got a new hobby, how fun, right? You've got all this cool content coming your way. So the very first step I would say to someone is curate your feed. Relentlessly curate.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so these days, my feed's pretty great. It's wellness, it's fitness, it's things I'm learning, mindset, productivity hacks. It's all great stuff, and a few little cute, dog and cat videos here and there, right?
Of course, that's like a requirement in social media.
Yeah. So in terms of politics and following current events, I read long form essays. That's how I receive my information right now, because I think it is important to be informed. But for me, I don't absorb any of that through social media if I can help it. Of course, it bleeds through a little bit, right? So I'd say that's the first step, is really curating your feed. Now, I wouldn't say that this is going to make it any less addictive. Honestly, I think that it's still the same mechanisms are still in place. You might not be, if you're someone that is maybe caught in that little trap of getting really mad and upset about the other side, and there's a lot of content that's meant to really
feed you,
elicit these strong reactions, so that might lessen once you curate those sorts of things out. But the addictive nature is still there. Instagram is created on the same mechanism as a slot machine, right?
Mm.
So truly, when you think about, if you're struggling, if a person is struggling with their digital use, the thing to remember is this is not really a fair fight, right? They pumped billions of dollars in,
It's not intended to be a fair fight either.
yeah, there's very smart people working on this. They've created something to be as addictive as possible, to keep as many minutes of your eyeballs glued to the screen as possible. So it's just nice for people to remember that, these are created as addictive as they can be. And so to not have any shame around if you're feeling,
Mhm.
that compulsion, right, is
Mhm.
the first thing to recognize.
Yeah, that is important to recognize. I think it's also important along the same line to recognize that because of the way that works, the first question you need to ask yourself is, when something's being reflected back to you, how do you feel about it? I mean, very often addiction occurs because of issues that are going on within ourselves. I think that's probably fair to say that's always going to be the case. But the nature of what's being reflected back to us is telling us what it is that we keep getting sucked into. What it is that every time that presses that hot button, like, oh God, I got to respond to that hot button. It tells us what our hot buttons are.
Yeah,
And
sure.
if you want to, you can actually turn that into, well, okay, well, what do I want to do about that? Do I like that hot button? Do I dislike it? Do I want to stay with it? Do I want to go away? I can learn how to start making choices about it.
Yeah.
So addictiveness on the one hand, on the other hand, empowerment. It depends on how you use it.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And then I'll talk about now some other ways to set boundaries. And these are more or less physical boundaries, right? So for me, one of the things I'm working on is being off of all screens from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. There is so much research around how terrible screens are for your sleep. And we know sleep is very important for your happiness, your
You
well-being,
know
your
that well.
health. And so we've all probably heard this by now. This is not news to anyone, I'm sure, but it is so critical and it's so hard to do. So working on pushing out the times that you're on your screens. And I'll just point out this amazing book really quick. I've got it right here. It's Digital Minimalism by Cal Newport.
Okay.
And he has written another book. He's written lots of books. The other one is Deep Work. And these are really amazing books to help you with some of these strategies, right? So he talks about in this book replacing the time you might spend scrolling with high quality hobbies.
Hmm.
And one of the things that I think is really important for people to realize is that, let's say you've had a long day and you're tired, you just want to relax and watch some Netflix or scroll social media. That's not actually a break for your brain.
That's surprising too, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
most person would think that it is, but it really isn't. You're right.
It's not. Your brain is still having to process so much information and having to track all these things, right? And so it's really not a restful period for your brain, and it's going to result in you being more tired, more exhausted, in addition to you sort of using up some of these dopamine reserves. You've gone foraging for this dopamine, and you're in that kind of addictive dopamine cycle.
Mm.
So replacing this with high quality activities that seem like they might be more tiring, like let's say you are an artist and you do some painting at night or collaging, or you're a writer and you write, or a woodworker and you do some crafts, whatever it is. These are things that are going to feel more restful and fulfilling in the long run.
I'm also curious to know what your take is on using your technology to reduce the blue screen effect, because I'm kind of taking advantage here. I mean, this is probably something you already know about, but most people, I think, have heard to some degree that there's this blue screen thing that goes on. And it's true. It ties in directly to what you were talking about. It ties into the inability to rest properly. It ties into the higher levels of stress and so forth. What people don't realize is a lot of people think they have to go get special glasses, or they have to, take away all the devices and so forth and all the time, and that otherwise you're going to be in trouble. But they don't realize their devices actually give them a way to turn the blue screen off.
Yeah.
It's actually built in. And all you have to do is just go set the settings, and a large chunk of that blue screen effect disappears. I
Yeah.
mean, do you encounter that with your clientele? Do you find that they don't realize that that's even there?
Yeah, and there's all kinds of great it's funny because there's all kinds of great technology, that you can use, different apps, different settings, things that can help you actually within your phone,
Mm,
right? That can help you in this regard. So when it comes to like, well, should I use a piece of technology to help combat the effects of technology? Whatever, use whatever, you
mhm.
can,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, I mean, there's so much available to us, and I think truly a lot of times we're just too busy in the scroll to
Yeah.
investigate. Okay, how could I do this a little bit better, right? But I'm not sure that that quite addresses the underlying issue, which is sort of the ways that our lives might be taken over a little bit by
Oh, sure. Yeah. Oh,
yeah,
I agree with that. I wasn't suggesting
yeah,
that as a strategy for solving the problem. I was saying,
right,
why not reduce the problem? At least, reduce the impact on you just by taking that factor out so that, yeah, you are stressed. You're just not as stressed as you could be because you took away the blue screen. I
exactly.
mean,
Do it,
it's
do it.
huge. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure, definitely. But yeah, and another thing I'm really excited about right now is in-person community, and
Mm,
we have seen definitive data as well that the amount of in-person interactions
yeah.
is decreasing, and at the same time mental illness, isolation, depression, anxiety is increasing, right? And of course, COVID did not do us any favors
No.
in this regard, right? We know that. But the technology and social media, especially, and also the streaming platforms, again, so much great content, not arguing about that. And I'm not saying that there's not benefit to these, but a lot of times it's almost completely replacing the drive, the motivation, the intention to get out there and create in-person community and or sustain it, right? And that I think this is something to talk openly about because it's a lot easier to sit and scroll and feel like you're connecting. And that's the heartbreaking part, I
Mhm.
think, is that we all are looking for deeper connections. We want relationships. We want to be close to the people we care about and, meet new people, but we're doing it on these platforms, and it's a very different kind of interaction than in-person community. And it also decreases the bandwidth that you might have to go do these things. Inevitably, in-person interactions are going to be more awkward.
Mhm.
They don't always go perfectly. It's a little messier in real life, but our species has evolved to be embodied together, in our physical bodies, looking at each other. There's so many little tiny things that are happening with our faces, the nuance of body language that of course we aren't getting in those digital spaces.
Right. Yeah. And it's huge. You're reminding me there was a couple that came onto the show about, I'm going to say 4 or 5 months ago, something like that. Gen Z. And they came on basically to talk about how they had decided with a few of their friends, they were going to do a weekend retreat together. And they were going to do it with the idea they were all going to agree they're going to turn off their phones for the entire weekend. And then they
Wow.
had the weekend, and it was the most amazing experience they'd ever had in their lives because they never had a complete 2-day period of just no devices, just interact with each other. I mean, you should have seen them on screen. They were like glowing with enthusiasm about something that when I grew up, that was like the normal way of doing it. Today, it is unusual. I mean, it's not a typical thing, although it is being picked up by more and more young people, which I'm really liking. But you're working particularly within the realm of people who work within the nonprofit organizations. And I'm thinking there's an added piece that brings into it. So I want to kind of bring that in if we can. But
Sure.
but
Yeah.
let's talk about like who's the avatar of the person who works in that particular field right now.
Yeah, well, I coach all kinds of people. I work with nonprofit sector currently as a consultant, and that's in communications. So I help them with their digital marketing and their strategic communications. But in terms of coaching people with digital minimalism, I work with all people, and I
Okay.
mostly work with people that are trying to do something really hard, like write
Uh,
a book or launch a business, or artists that are trying to create a gallery body of work. And a lot of people are saying, this is definitely the case with nonprofit sector, that they don't have any time. No one has.
Yeah, that's common these days.
Yeah. And to your example of the couple, I run these screen-free Sunday challenges. It's just a free challenge, and it's just like what it sounds. It's 24 hours, no screens. And people find this impossible. I thought it was going to be I thought it was kind of a silly challenge. Like, well, of course we can all be off our screens. It's not really tough, but in fact, it's almost impossible for most people. But the survey results show that almost everyone says, "Oh my gosh, I have so much more time in the day than I thought I had."
Right. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah,
Like
and
shift of experience shifts your understanding about what your daily experience really is.
right. And so when we look at professionals, in the nonprofit sector or otherwise, when we look at their body of work and how stressed they are and how frazzled their minds feel and how fractured their attention is, this is a huge part of it, right? And in terms of just our well-being, our physical well-being and our emotional well-being, our mental health, this is a really big piece that's affecting us right now.
That's very good. I like that. So what's the feedback been from people who have managed to at least try the 24-hour Sunday free of devices experience?
Yeah, there's a lot of anxiety,
Yeah.
right? And I think we have, of course, become so used to people being able to get a hold of us all the time. I understand with parents, it's probably wonderful to be able to connect with your kids via cell phone now, but as before, I'm in my 40s, so I remember that time before cell phones, and it's sort of like no one was that stressed about not being able to reach everyone 24 hours a day. We just accepted it. But now, because we have had that experience and that's our daily reality, it becomes really kind of scary sometimes to think about leaving the house without your phone or, there being an emergency. So
Right.
People get pretty anxious about it, and they can feel really aimless, and the survey results, someone said like, well, you didn't really give us a plan for what to do with our hours of the day. Like, oh, wow. So now I help people at least create their own plan. Right. And because the void can feel so massive. And really remembering one of my favorite pieces of feedback was the person said, I remembered what my hobbies were.
Okay.
And, just in one day, they remembered what kinds of things they used to love to do physically, and started to get back to them. And that's really powerful, I think, when you start to think about what are the things that are really important to me. And I'd say just overall, that is the ethos of digital minimalism, is not throw away all the stuff. It's similar to physical minimalism of belongings and material items. And that is, what is the ethos? What is the core value that I want to bring forward in the world? And how can my technology support that? How can my digital use support those core values? So if it's health and wellness, if it's service, if it's community, use the tools to help support that in your life. And then release the other, I'd say superfluous kinds of use, right?
The superfluous kinds of use. Okay. Well, we could go down that list, I think, and probably find some interesting conversation points about what some people are finding to be superfluous and other people find to be deadly important. But
Yeah. Right.
but I also I'm kind of curious to pursue along the lines of what we were talking about a moment ago, in that the example I gave was of the couple who had a special weekend that they did with their friends where they all put their phones away for the weekend. And to me, the key component there was they all did it together. So there was a connection going on. They were all connecting. And I'm curious, to what degree do you suggest with your phone-free Sunday approach, do you suggest making sure there's also some kind of connection going on?
Well, I love this question. Thank you. Yeah, because I care about connection clearly and community. So yeah, I would say if that day if within, let's say, a 24-hour period, if you can connect with someone in person, do it. Absolutely. Right. It's a little trickier because you can't be texting leading up to it, like the old days, and that you say, I'll meet you here at, at noon for lunch, and then just be there. Right. So it's a little trickier. So it's just something to note for people that you're meeting up with. But if you can do that, that is wonderful. And we are becoming less comfortable with solitude. And by solitude, I don't mean physically being alone by yourself. I mean not having any other ideas coming into your brain, right? So that's another idea that Cal Newport talks about a lot. And the reason this is important is that we need space in our brains to work out our problems in our life, right? To think about stuff, to think deeply, to work things out, to process. And we don't have that when we're in resting mode, scrolling and streaming and whatever. And solitude is a space a critical space that we have so much less of now, where we can do that. And this is very important for young people. And this is one of the reasons that mental health is declining for young people so rapidly, is that they just have no space anymore in their own brains to process things. So if you can meet up with people in person instead of screens, absolutely do it. And solitude, being alone with your thoughts, is great. So I'll just make sure I'm clear on this. I love podcasts. I presume you do too. I presume a lot of your listeners do too, right? We're in this podcast world. And, time without inputs from other people. So if you're going for a walk, not listening to podcasts every single time, just a long, slow, boring, silent walk, is really important to kind of cultivate that ability to be with your own thoughts again.
By the way, it's also a great way to learn quickly that it's not so boring.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, that's something I'm working on right now, is how long can I go in silence? And, I love music, I love podcasts, but it's a real skill that we've lost to be able to just be with our own thoughts, and trying to, maybe that's 2 minutes for people, when they first start, then increase it to 5, then increase it to 10 minutes. And I'm not even talking about meditating. I'm just talking about doing the dishes or waiting in line at a store. These are skills that we need to rebuild for the quality of our lives.
I think there's a lot of truth to that. Because really that's also very consistent with the idea of meditation itself. I mean, the idea of meditation is to quiet your surrounding mind, to quiet your inner mind. And if it doesn't get entirely quiet, that's okay. That's the point, is not perfection, but it's the idea of quieting within, quieting the breathing, calming it all down, engaging the parasympathetic system rather than the sympathetic system. All the steps that are involved in reconnecting with yourself. That's really what you're talking about.
Yeah.
That's big stuff.
And I just want to emphasize too that the benefit is pretty great. At first, maybe not so much. When you're first relearning this skill, especially if you haven't set any boundaries around your digital use, there's people that are almost constantly on a screen, obviously at work, and then they're at home, and sometimes many screens at a time.
Yeah.
Right. So someone actually suggested changing the challenge to a only one screen at a time challenge. And so it's interesting the different places people are at on their journey. And that's a good suggestion. If people are using, I know people that are using 3 or 4 screens at a time, right? Of course, they can only look at one, but they might have their smartwatch giving them notifications, their phone, an iPad, and a TV. So you try to go from that to nothing. That's pretty tough, right? So baby stepping down. But the benefits that you can see from this are wonderful. An ability to focus, to complete tasks, not feeling so stretched thin, so frazzled. If you struggle with anxiety at all, this can be very, very beneficial for you. So it is worth it. It is worth it.
Well, I would even add in, one of the biggest benefits is a greater appreciation for life. And the reason I say that is, well, you gave the example of taking a walk. where I have a particular walking trail right near where I live. It's one of these rails to trails type places. And I mean, even though I walk the same path every single time I go out there, so it's all very, very familiar to me, I see something different every time. Something naturally different. Maybe I see an animal I didn't see before. Maybe I see something that some human left behind. There's always something new. There's something different that's going on. So even if I don't encounter anybody else on the trail, there's always something new to experience out in that natural world. And the more that I do that, the more I realize this is pretty cool. This is a really nice place. And the more that I think about it that way, the more it has the calming effect on me, and the more that it helps me to center more on myself, be in that place where I want to be in, so that I can step away from social media and it's not a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll just point out here that this is a great example, because similar to other kinds of addiction, we know that it alters your dopamine baseline, right? So let's say you're drinking a lot of alcohol. That will mean that normal experiences like taking a walk and seeing all the things you just described is going to be less interesting, less pleasurable.
Initially, sure. Yeah.
Initially, absolutely initially.
Yeah.
Less fun, because your actual chemical dopamine reserves have been altered, right? And so this is a great point, because the things that we're sort of used to doing as a species, when we have these artificial inputs, these things become less pleasurable at first. And when you go back to it, I'm telling you, it is such a joy to be able to do those things like you just said, and have that be a lovely experience, right? And I want people to embrace the idea of boredom again, except I don't want to use the word boredom, because there's negative connotation with boredom, obviously, but it's the idea of being able to be content and present without all of these crazy inputs coming in to your mind, right?
Yeah,
And
I don't even find it to be boring anymore. I mean, I know what you mean, because initially I had to kind of push myself to do it. So in that sense, it was boring. Like, oh God, I'm doing this thing again. But the funny thing is, this is one of the beauties of the way our minds are, the neuroplasticity of the brain and so forth, our ability to reprogram ourselves to have a different experience from what we used to have through our intentions and through our actions and through our thoughts and so forth. The experience of making the shift and then getting to a point where you think about it differently, it's fascinating if you can watch that over time and note just how much you thought about it differently a week ago or 2 weeks ago or 5 months ago or a year ago, or in my case, 13 years ago. I mean, when you look back, you say, wow, it's astonishing how different it is. Because I think I told you, I had a nonprofit organization business that collapsed with the 2008 financial crisis. Unrelated. I wasn't doing real estate or mortgages. I wasn't doing all that stuff. My clientele disappeared because they got wiped out by it. And at that point, obviously I was depressed. I was dealing with a tremendous amount of financial stress. Plus I was married at the time. My wife also, her business got wiped out. So everything got totally wiped out within about 1 month period, and the entire income gone. And the stress level was completely unbelievable. It took about 4 years for me to even understand how to ask the right questions that led to the answers that helped me to climb out of that, including doing this podcast. But I also, in the process, learned to value the fact that I could make shifts that would change my experience, so that even though by like 8 years after the financial crisis, I was still deep in debt, at least things had turned around a bit. And having gone through all those trials and tribulations, I found that the little changes I had made had shifted the way I felt compared to when I first started to try to make changes, like going out and taking those daily walks. Because those first few were tough. They were really tough. And my ex-wife gave me a really good, well, there was a little side thing that went along with it. At that point in time, I truly and honestly believed that any time that you experience anything in life that has any kind of emotional component to it, there was just a default emotion that went with it. And that was the only thing that would ever happen to you. It never occurred to me. I never really believed that you could change that experience by choosing what you're going to focus on, that you could actually shift your emotional experience. When I look back on that, I think about how she suggested that I take my walk. That when I take my walk, she said, just look for a flower. I said, why? I don't care about flowers. You're the flower person in the family. I don't give a crap about flowers. She said, no, 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 go look for a flower. I said, why? She said, just go look up close at it. Look at, the stamen and pistils. Look at all the stuff inside the flower and so forth, and just see what's there. I said, oh, all right. And what that little exercise did, by doing that over a course of about a month or so, is it started to shift the way that I thought about taking the walk. Because basically I'd given myself an assignment, right? I said, okay, well, part of my assignment is to go out and just find some flowers to look at. Stupid as they are, I'm going to go find some flowers to look at. And that action alone, well, first of all, it taught me that I could shift the way that I think about things, which I did not really expect was going to happen. But secondly, it also shifted the way I felt about going out and taking that action. Just by doing it on a repetitive basis like that, I felt, within like a couple months, I felt like, oh, I'm looking forward to looking at these flowers that I didn't care about before. And it wasn't like I had suddenly decided to become a gardener. That wasn't what was going on. It was just, oh, well, at least I like the color. That's nice.
Mhm.
Nice color combination on some of these flowers. Okay, I get that. That's good. And just that alone started to shift my mindset. And when you shift your mindset, I mean, that's really what we're aiming at here. When you shift your mindset, that's when you're able to let go of the social media. That's when you're able to start letting go of addictions. That's when you can start doing all the things that you really wanted to do all along before you got trapped by the current setup.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a great point, and that's speaking to a larger point, which is that you can change your life.
Yeah.
I mean, you really can. And it is true that when you set about creating those intentions, even very, very small, such as your flower example, you really can change your brain.
Oh yeah.
And I found that, and now it's to the point, before it was almost in survival mode and things had to change and I was in this rock bottom. And so you're sort of scrambling to do the changes, without really that much, proof that it's going to work, I'd say. But then when you're on this journey, it sounds like that you've been on for a little bit, that I've been on, then you start to see the changes. And then I start to get really curious, like, wow, oh my gosh, I really did just change that habit or that way of being. For example, I used to think I was a night owl. And I used to think I was an insomniac. And I did experience both of those things. I had a really tough time going to bed and a really tough time sleeping. And my belief system was, oh, I'm just this way. I'm an insomniac and I'm a night owl. Well, I was also drinking red wine every night. Right?
Oh, okay. Yeah. The truth comes out.
Yeah. And I also I wasn't in therapy. I wasn't really addressing some of the deeper issues. And I wasn't managing my digital use. And so, yeah, like my poor body and brain was just dealing with all this stuff coming in, and I never had that deep rest, that space, and the intention to get myself into bed at a reasonable time. Right. And now it's really not that hard to go to bed, at a pretty early. I go to bed pretty early and wake up early, and it's phenomenal. And lo and behold, oh, I'm not a night owl. I just, but it did take some work to change that habit.
Sure.
But the outcome has been phenomenal. And so now it's, once you get a little taste of this, you can start to see the progress, then it becomes easier to apply it in other parts of your life.
And also, it's amazing how often it applies in other areas of your life without you intending to.
Oh, yeah, sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You get this result and you say, wait a minute, how'd that happen? Oh, I guess that must have happened because of what I was doing, taking the walks. Wait a minute, how is that possible? But you start noticing stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely.
And over time, the accumulated evidence gets to the point where, I don't know what your take is. My take was, what the hell took me so long to notice this?
Yeah. I can go down that road sometimes, and I try to shift it to, I'm so grateful I figured it out.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Some people don't. Some people don't figure these things out, don't change their life, just stay in the spot that they're in. So
Mm,
yeah.
yeah, that's very cool. I love this. So, I know that we talked briefly about how you ended up making the shift, but why did you end up making the shift that led you on this path?
Yeah, well, I one of the keys for me in my life managing my mental health, which takes considerable effort for me, it was running my own business. So I
Mm,
really wanted to serve clients in a different relationship than working, as an employee. And I launched a consulting practice, and I serve these, different clients, agencies, etc. But I love working with people one on one and in small.
ah,
Yeah. And so I launched this coaching arm. The word coach is a little loaded, so I don't use it all the time. But truthfully, I'd say I hold space for people to bring forward their different works in the world and do things together, right? Because we do need community sometimes, and a lot of
right.
change happens on the individual level, obviously, but it is wonderful to have people around you on the same path. And I always get a little jealous of like the AAA communities just because of the community. Like, wow, it
Mm,
must be so neat to see these people so many
mhm.
times a week and, have heard their stories and share and be vulnerable with each other. And so, I'm working to create that for people in a different capacity, of course, in a different space. But the same idea, we are a tribal species. We need community, we need people around us. And I love facilitating that kind of group.
And actually, when you come down to it, a lot of people are considering this kind of a path because they're not achieving whatever kind of success they're looking for in their life. It could be financial success, business success, relationship success, health success, all kinds of stuff. But whatever that success is, they're not achieving the success that they're looking for. And when you start making the shifts so that you can achieve success, one of the things that I found just from the people I've interviewed over the years is that the ones who report the greatest success are the ones who have developed a circle of people around them that are their ideal circle of people rather than whoever they are by default. They actually curate who's going to be in that circle and who's not going to be in that circle so that they have that mastermind effect. And I know
Mhm.
mastermind is a big part of what you do. So let's talk about mastermind for a bit.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I'll just add on to your great point, and that is that at different times in our life, we might have a circle of people around us that made sense for that time period and might not make sense for the person that you're growing into. And that's not to say to be harsh or say you should ditch people or anything like that, but just again, coming back to the core values, what are the core values you might have, and then those are going to change over time, and it's okay to grow into a different era, right? And I think mine, at some point, I think if you've been a little drinky in your past, you might have a circle of friends that go out to the bars and drink
Mhm.
and do all kinds of stuff, and that's a really common one to kind of grow out of and into a
Mm,
different space where maybe you're doing more mountain climbing or you're doing more hobbies or service work, volunteering, whatever, right? So I love your point about intention with people, and that's an area that people can really default to in their lives. Well, I've known this person for 20 years, and so we just go do this stuff together. I mean, we don't really have any of the same shared interests and not much to talk about, but like I've known them for 20 years.
Well, I have
And
one interest in common with them. We go and drink, and we have that one. No, there's one.
yeah, that's the one. That's it. Yeah. And so to really give that some thought and it be okay to transition and people come into your life for what's that quote, a reason, a season, or
Mhm.
whatever, and it's not forever often. So anyway, but in terms of a mastermind, this is there's lots of different kinds of masterminds in the world. I think this is a term from Napoleon Hill,
Mhm.
right, way back in the day.
Yep.
And it's a group, and it can be a very informal group, very chit chatty, or it can be very focus driven. And the one I run is high accountability. People have different feelings about that. High accountability, and it's for women. It's a 6-month container, and it's for women that are just it is like they need to get something done. And I think back to graduate school when we were all writing our dissertations, we were all doing the same thing. We're all in the same space. And that was our goal. And we all knew that we were working on this massive goal, right? And it was so wonderful to be held by that group and that intention and that goal. And that's a little bit of what I'm trying to create is helping each other to bring forward something really challenging.
Well, let's talk a little bit too about what are the kinds of things that come out of it. I'll give you an example to get the conversation started. That I do 2 shows on Monday. The second show is with a gentleman named Joel Elston, who was my 12th interview back in 2012, and we have maintained contact to this day. And we've been, I don't know how many episodes we've done. We've probably done 200 or 300 episodes just between the two of us. But Joel is a part of a mastermind group, kind of an informal one that meets, I think, monthly. And I believe it's a breakfast that they do. But he went to one recently being defined within the last 6 months or so, in which one of the people in the group said, Joel, you haven't done anything crazy in a while. You should do something crazy. And so he did. He sold his house.
Yeah.
And it kind of opened things up for him. He's got an apartment now, and he's a very successful guy. A really fascinating story that's associated with him. But he's now, because of making that shift, he's now considering things he hadn't even been considering before, just by going through the action of selling his house that he had for all these years.
Yeah, that's kind of a powerful point, because I think we can get pretty stuck. And I was talking to someone whose entire premise of the work that they do is helping people get out of we call it humdrums or something, where it's just the same routine every single day. And yeah, I agree. Change can be very powerful in terms of your environment, shaking things up, changing something very big, like owning a house or not. So yeah, that's a really neat idea. And it's interesting that it came from his mastermind members.
Well, yeah, exactly. And it makes me wonder, can you think of any interesting stories that have come out of your mastermind that somebody suggested this, that to the other person, and they went off and did this thing, and this other thing happened, and all that kind of thing?
Well, I will say that often you end up pretty intertwined in each other's lives. And so there's a lot of examples in my world of people not knowing each other when they come in. And I love seeing new relationships blossom. And then people start being on each other's podcasts, doing work together, collaborating. So I spoke at a conference that's based in New York City from a woman I met in the mastermind, right? And the ideas that can come up when you're with a group of people that you might not come up with on your own, and the collaboration. And it's neat because the mastermind is that safe space to bounce these ideas off of each other. And also you're sort of tracking each other's journeys too, right?
Sure.
And seeing where people are at and being able to celebrate them along the way.
That's really good. I like that. It's an amazing thing, the whole mastermind concept. And if you experience one, but most people, I don't think, have ever actually experienced a mastermind in a formal sense. They probably experienced it in an informal sense without realizing it. But in terms of consciously doing it, I would guess it's probably less than 1% of the population that have done it.
I would agree. Yeah. People are confused by that term. I love them. If I had all the time in the world and all the money, I would be part of tons of different masterminds. And as it is, because there's so many great digital communities as well. And again, I think there's great value in those as well as in-person community. And so you get to the point sometimes where you've joined a lot of things. So you got to be a little judicious about which ones you keep. But yeah, if someone hasn't tried a mastermind, I would say give it a shot. And again, you can even start your own. It doesn't have to cost anything. You could make a very loose commitment that's once a month, meet up on Zoom for an hour, and just talk about what's going on in your life. And you don't have to be a business owner to do it. You don't have to be a podcaster. You can just be a person that has any interest to discuss anything with a group of people.
It's a very worthwhile experience. The closest that I come on a regular basis to experiencing is by just doing this podcast, because I interview hundreds of people a year, plus I have my regular co-host. So usually, we're a little unusual today because it's just the two of us, but usually there's 3 people on the show. That's a little tiny nuclear community, but it's a community. And for that 1 hour period, you're doing all this connecting and you're learning about the perspective of the other person and how they think about things. How much do you agree with? How much do you disagree with? It almost doesn't
Mhm.
matter because the perspective teaches you just so much. So when you combine that with the idea of a mastermind, which is, but we didn't really define what a mastermind is, but essentially it's a place to exchange ideas, exchange,
Yeah.
perceptions, and share advice to each other, or there's no rules, no rhyme or reason about here's what the regulations are. It's not like
No.
that. It's just whatever you decide your mastermind is going to be, that's what it's going to be. But when you have that regular experience, particularly with a group of people that I mean, it's kind of similar to that television program Friends. They all were friends. They all knew each other. They would periodically hang out and so forth. They were almost like a mastermind. That's
Yeah.
not what the series was about, but that's pretty much what they were.
I say so, a mastermind for life
Yeah.
and very silly situations. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was funny because I was talking to one of my mastermind friends, and she's doing a retreat in Sedona. And I was thinking like, oh yeah, gosh, it'll be so great to see you. I haven't seen you in so long. And then I realized I'd actually never met her in person. Right? We had just been meeting for so many years online, and we were so close, and we messaged back and forth off, out of the group setting. And I literally it took me a minute to realize, yeah, I had never met her in person.
Isn't that something? Well, it also shows it shows the positive side to all these digital connections that we have. I mean, it can work either way. It's a tool.
Yeah.
We can use them negatively, we can use them positively. It's entirely up to us which way we're going to do it. So choose wisely.
I love that point. The metaphor of a hammer can be used to build a house, or it can do you harm.
Yeah.
Right. And I actually really lean on this metaphor a lot, because when I think about a hammer as well, I would never say don't use the hammer if that's the right tool to build a house. But the minute that you start hanging out with the hammer more than people, if you're having lunch with someone and you're talking to the hammer instead of, the person in front of you, if you take the hammer to bed, then start to question the relationship with the tool, right?
Or perhaps even ask yourself, what do you hammer on most often in your life? Are you hammering on stuff that's actually beneficial to you, or are you hammering on stuff that's actually detrimental to you?
Right.
Yeah. So you can even use it from the metaphorical viewpoint. But yeah, this is good stuff. We're starting to run short on time, so I think we should probably kind of tie a few things together. First and foremost, though, for somebody perhaps who wants to reach out about your mastermind group, you also mentioned to me before we got started that you have a summit in 6, that's basically the container for that mastermind. Isn't that right?
That's right. Yeah, that's the name of the mastermind. That's a 6-month container for women creatives and entrepreneurs to come together. It starts at the top of the quarter. So the next one will start in, I don't know when this will air, but January, and then each quarter beyond. And you'll be with your cohort, and the cohort will be moving through their specific summits. So summit in 6 months, but doing it together. And a lot of people, even if you're not working on exactly the same goal, supporting each other through accountability, and then accountability to the leader, to me is pretty powerful.
Yeah, that's good. That sounds very, very good. And if they want to learn more about that, or even if they want to find out more about you, maybe they want to reach out to you for a coaching context. Maybe they want to learn more about the kinds of things you talked about. How do they find you?
Absolutely. Yep. So my website is Kelsey L, like lemur, green, no E at the end, just like the color. So KelseyLGreen.com. And then my Instagram handle is the same, Kelsey L Green. I'm also on LinkedIn. And yeah, I'd love to chat with anybody that wants to work on increasing their in-person community, or wants to, bring something to life that has been on their heart for a long time.
And to emphasize what we touched on before, you don't just talk to people in nonprofits. You want to talk to anybody.
Yeah, that's right. I can really relate to people in nonprofits.
Yes, of course, right.
Having been there, so it's usually this kind of direct line to through our experiences. But yeah, I'd say this is applicable for anyone at any point. So yeah.
Normally, I have my co-host here, and I normally turn to her and ask, Anne-Marie, because Anne-Marie came to me actually as a listener before she was a co-host, and she has that listener perspective. So I always like to know from the listener's perspective, how do you tie this together? And she normally does it. I can't do that today, other than trying to do it from my own perspective, which I kind of hope that my perspective is similar to my listeners, but I don't dare think that. I'm
We
too
have some
biased.
listeners too, right? Lots of different perspectives.
Yeah, of course it is. Yeah. So I won't try to tie it together my way. Instead, I'm going to ask you to tie it together. How do you tie together what it is we've been talking about today?
Yeah, absolutely. So here's my takeaways. Setting digital boundaries in your life is going to help you get out and create in-person community. Digital boundaries are important for your brain, for your physical health, for your well-being, for the long-term, you know, um, I guess, effective way that you create community and keep those in-person relationships.
Mm,
And I would say that, putting some intention around this, even if it's challenging at first,
mm,
is going to be rewarding in the long term and is really going to benefit your life. And it's important. This is important to consider how you're utilizing these tools. Is it important to consider, are you choosing digital platforms over real people in your life? And just kind of, just kicking around those questions a little bit and seeing if it's something that you might want to examine in your life.
good stuff. I like that. We were talking earlier in the show about how we're living now in this time of this amazing technological transformation that 30 years ago we couldn't even do this. This was not even a possibility. Um, but now we take for granted that we can do this. This is no big deal now.
Mm.
Along with that, has provided to all of us the ability to reach out in ways that we were never able to reach out before, to talk to people around the world we never could talk to
Yeah.
interact with them in ways we could never interact before. And so many of us who have learned things along the way and are trying to share it with others, that's how I ended up doing my podcast. That's how you're doing your practice. We go out and we share. That's what we do. That's the whole
Yeah.
point. And in the process of doing that, we reach people that we never meet. We don't know what they're going to do with it, but they benefit in ways we don't even think about. And I thought to myself, that's kind of odd. We don't get credit for that anymore. It used to be we get credit for all the stuff that we interact with, but now we don't get credit for that.
Mm.
So, Kelsey, on behalf of those people you've never met, never seen, never will meet, never will see, who you've been helping in ways you didn't even know about just by doing these podcasts and writing the stuff that you write and sharing the stuff that you share on social media and helping the people to get off of social media when they need to get off and all that. On behalf of those people you've been helping in all those different ways without realizing it, thank you. Thank you for
Oh,
doing, because you're making a
thank you.
difference in this world.
Thank you so much. What a lovely way to wrap this up. And same to you. Absolutely. Appreciate your kind words.
We appreciate you so much. Thanks for joining us. Thanks to our podcast listeners everywhere. And we will see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.